There's a little trilogy. Let's see what arises out of it for us. He was a certain man of the Jewish faith who one day hastened to the house of his rabbi in a great state of agitation. When the door was opened by the rabbi, the man began to weep and said, "Rabbi, Rabbi, you have to help me. I'm losing my mind. I'm poor. I live in a small shack with my wife and 7 children and a mother-in-law and a father-in-law. And the noise and the mess and the demands. I wish I was dead. Will you help me, Rabbi?" The rabbi said, "Will you do exactly what I tell you to do?" "Yes, I'll do anything, Rabbi." Rabbi said, "What animals do you have?" The man said, "I've got a cow, a goat, and some chickens." The rabbi said, "Well, go home and bring the cow, the goat, and the chickens into your house." But, said the man. "You promised," said the rabbi. So off the man went and did what the rabbi told him to do. The very next day he was on the rabbi's doorstep knocking on the "Rabbi, Rabbi, it's dreadful. The cow is leaving her droppings all over the house and we're all stepping in it. It's dreadful, it's terrible." "Oh yes," said the rabbi. Tut. Go home and take the cow out of your house." But the very next day, there was the man again, knocking on the rabbi. "Rabbi, oh, it's dreadful. The goat's eating our mats. She's ate the straw out of our beds. We have nowhere to sleep. Rabbi, it's terrible." "Oh, yes," said the rabbi. Yes, I understand. Go home and take the goat out of your house." But the very next day, back comes the man, knocks on the Rabbi, the chickens are nesting in my head. They're sleeping in our beds. "Yes," said the rabbi. "Go home and take the chickens out of your house." The very next day, the man was back at the rabbi's door, and when the rabbi opened the door, there he was with a great beaming smile on his. Rabbi, I have to thank you. Thank you. Our house is so clean and peaceful. And then there's a little story about Mulla Nasruddin. Now, Mulla Nasruddin, we know, is that mystic joker. Now, one day, Mulla Nasruddin was sitting at the coffee shop with his friends, discussing death. And they were asking, "How do you know you're dead?" And someone said, "You're dead when you're cold and stiff." Well, it so happened it was the middle of winter. And on his way home, the Mulla got caught in a snowdrift and slipped into a ditch. As he was lying there, he thought to himself, "I'm cold and I'm stiff. I must be dead. I better go home and tell my wife." So he got out of his ditch and he went home, told his wife, "I'm dead," and he walked back to his ditch. And his wife started to wail and weep and cry and beat her chest, and the neighbours came running over and she said, "The Mulla is dead, the Mulla is dead." And they said, "We don't see anybody. How do you know?" She said, "Oh, he came home and told me himself." And then finally, there's the story of another man. He was a cobbler, and he also had 7 children and a wife. and he barely made a subsistence living. All they could afford to eat was potato soup. Potato soup every day when he came home from his little shop repairing shoes. Potato soup. And he was fed up with life. Absolutely fed up with it. He'd had enough of the struggle, the striving, the strife, the noise. So he prayed to God, please, God, show me the way to heaven. I want to die. So that night when he was sleeping, a booming voice came to him and said, do you really want to die? Go to heaven? Yes, said the man, show me the way to heaven. So the voice described how to get to heaven. So the very next day, the man set out, and as it happened, he thought from his dream that it was very easy to get there. It was just a few days' travel down the road. But at the end of the day, of the first day of walking, he got very, very tired. So he decided to go to sleep under a tree. But he thought, oh, I'd better make sure that I don't lose my way. So before he lay down to sleep, he pointed his shoes in the way to go to heaven. So when he got up in the morning, he would not be confused. He would not go in the wrong direction. Ha-ha! Was it an angel? Was it an elf? Who knows? But during the night, something turned his shoes round the other way. So when he got up in the morning and slipped himself into the shoes, he was on the road back to his village again. Well, he thought he was on the way to heaven, of course, and he climbed a hill, and there at the bottom of the hill in a valley nestled a little village. I'm at heaven. I've arrived. I'm here. But when he got down into the village, he thought, it's very like my village back home. But when he went into the square, whereas before it was noise and cacophony and wagons and people, it was a joyous sound. He sat down on the well in the middle of the square and he revelled in this beautiful sounds of the children playing and the vendors screaming out for their wares and heaven. And then he thought to himself, well, if this place is so much like my village back, or maybe there's a street like where I used to live. So he went down the street and sure enough, there was a house just like the house he used to live in. And he thought, oh, I wonder if there's someone there like I used to have my wife. And so he knocked on the door and a woman opened the door. He looked exactly like his wife. And she invited him in and said, where have you been? We've got the potato soup cooking, your dinner's ready. Well, when he sat down, when he ate his potato soup, it tasted like the nectar of the gods. He'd never tasted anything so delicious in his life. He said, oh, this food of heaven is really very good. He went to sleep that night and he slept the most blissful sleep that he's ever slept. He said, this heaven is really quite wonderful. Next morning he got up and his wife handed him his tools, his cobbler's tools. And he thought to himself, oh, work in heaven? Oh, well, I suppose, well, it stands to reason that you don't just sit around and enjoy heaven. So he took up his tools and he went to his cobbler's shop, which was just like the cobbler's shop. And he enjoyed his work, sewed his shoes and nailed on the soles. And you know, for the rest of his life, nobody could convince him that he wasn't in heaven. And if we put these three little stories together, what's the question that arises out of them for us? Out of these three little stories, what is the question that arises for us? Well, if you haven't got a question, you must have found the answer.
What answer? That's the thing. What answer?
Right?
There's a question.
See a trick job.